ain't gon' sing. Hey, there's levels to this thing. I'ma work till I get to see my king. Feeling like King James, like I'm about to win a ring. Man.
We got the same matches, we at different levels. I'ma have to find a way to push the pedal. But my Christian racer get the gold medal.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the First Love TV show. My name is Andrea, and I'm here with Francisca.
What's good, guys?
Marion.
Hey, guys.
And today we have a guest, Chloe, all the way from the UK.
Chip, chip, cheerio.
Today is going to be another exciting show. Last week we began looking at the topic of King David, and we read from 1 Chronicles 29, 26 to 28. And it says, "Now David, the son of Jesse, reigned over all Israel. The period which he reigned over Israel was 40 years. He reigned in Hebron 7 years, and in Jerusalem 33 years. Then he died in a ripe old age, full of days, riches, and honor. And his son Solomon reigned in his place." And this is a wonderful testimony. And last week we began looking at some of the principles in which he applied in order to get to this stage in his life. And today we're going to be looking at some other principles. So Marian, how do you think that David rose up to this great fame?
Well, as you mentioned, Andrea, I think David is definitely somebody that we should be looking to. And one thing that I take from his life is the fact that he behaved wisely even though he was blessed. Like the Bible says in 1 Samuel 18, 14, and 15, I'll read it. It says, "And David behaved himself wisely in all his ways, and the Lord was with him. Wherefore, when Saul saw that he behaved himself very wisely, he was afraid of him." And I think from the scripture we can take that, and even David's life in the Bible that we see, we can take that he behaved very wisely. And what I mean by that is, even though he was a king, even though he had responsibilities, he still knew that he still placed his priorities on his relationship with God. And I think somebody in the Bible who did not live wisely, even though they had been blessed, was the prodigal son. And as you could see through his life, even though he gained a large inheritance, in the end, he had nothing to show for it because he had squandered it all on things that meant nothing, prostitutes, things like that. And then you can see that the older brother, exposed. But then the older brother, you can see that he stayed in the house, and as a result, at the end, he ended up inheriting all that the father had. So I believe from that example, we can see that whenever you behave wisely, even though you have money, because the older brother also had an inheritance, but he decided that he wasn't going to take it out at that moment because that was not the wise thing to do. And rather, he ended up being more blessed than even the younger brother. Yeah.
Yeah, and even when you look in life, a lot of times people end up penniless, although they maybe started out in the beginning with so much money. Even when you look at, let's say, students, for example, or just even people who are workers, there are times in your life where God will promote you and God will move you to a certain stage. And in that promotion, it may come, like I'm relating it to the prodigal son, it may come with you receiving riches. And I think in those days, at times when we get riches, we don't know how to save it, we don't know how to invest it. We think that we're going to have riches all the time. And so that's why the prodigal son decided, okay, I'm going to go spend my money, I'm going to use it on loose living, I'm just going to enjoy myself, rather than thinking about, okay, what are the things that I can invest in, and behaving wisely when he was blessed. So I think it's important that in your blessing, in your uplifting, you do not forget or you do not neglect what God has given you, and know that it can be easily destroyed or taken away.
And one thing that you said was do not forget, and it reminds me of how they said don't forget where you came from, because at the moment in your life where you're coming from, you were able to survive without being, I wouldn't say without not being blessed, but you were able to survive with whatever was given to you at the moment. So only because God elevates you or now you're blessed does not mean that you have to be, that you don't use wisdom in the things that you're doing. So let's just say maybe you were someone that was poor, you're middle class, and now you're like someone that's rich. It does not mean now you just live that lavish life. You know, it's important to also save for a rainy day, like how they say it. So we have to make a conscious effort like David did, that he did not just become very foolish with what he had, but he was also wise with the blessings that were given to him.
Yeah, that reminds me, like I have an example myself. Whenever I started my summer job, I was really excited that I was making money. But then instead of saving my money, I ended up just spending it all back at the store I was working at.
Same, girl.
Because it was a clothing store and I liked the clothes. I was like, this is cute. So slowly but surely, all my money was leaving my account. And by the end of summer, I had like nothing to show for all the hard work that I'd done. And I realized at the end I had not behaved wisely. And like later on, like during college, if I wanted to go out with my friends, I had like no money, so I had to save. So yeah, I think it's important that you behave wisely even when it seems like you have a lot at the time.
I have an example that's just like Marion's. Well, I got a summer job where I was working like 9 to 5, and I always used to treat myself and my friends, and I'd say, oh, I'll go out, I'll pay
It's
for
on me.
everyone. I felt like, I kind of think it's like the prodigal son, where like he was living lavish with everyone that was around him. And by the end of the summer, my friends didn't necessarily leave me, but I was left with nothing. And my dad was asking me, so you've been working for how many weeks now, and what's in your bank account? And I was like, oh, no answer. But it just shows you like what they were saying before, that you have to be wise with the promotions and the blessings that you've been getting. Otherwise, you, like Marion said, you'll have nothing to show for it.
And as youth, we don't think about, even when you hear the words of retirement, it's like, oh, that's for old people. Let me just use my money. Or when you think about savings, it's like, oh, I can save when I'm 30, or I can save when I'm 50, and I have so much money. But you don't realize that in little things you can save. And even when we shift from talking about money, one of the things that always comes to my mind is the parable of the rich fool, which is found in Luke 12. And if you guys don't mind me reading it, it says,
girl.
the ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I will do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, drink, eat, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. And you can also get to a place in your Christian life where God blesses you like this rich fool. He failed to realize that his blessings and his promotion was coming from God. You can get to a place where you think that maybe your blessings or your promotion is by your own strength, by your own might, by your own power. And you can even forget the things of God. You can forget serving God. You can even come to a place that instead of now giving tithes and offerings or giving onto the house of God, it's like, no, I want to keep my money to myself. 10% of tithes, that's like how much, if you're making 3,000 and you give 300, it's like, what? That's a lot of money. Exactly. A lot of us are like, that's a lot of money. Even when you say offering, it's like we will put our hand in our pocket and put out $1. But when we want to, or some coins. But when we want to go to McDonald's or Burger King or some other places, we can spend $15, $20.
Marion.
But we don't realize that the money that we're getting is from God. So it's important that you remember God and that he's the one that's blessing you, and give onto his house and support the house of God.
Yeah, and that even makes me think of college students. Like, I'm a college student. I believe all of us have been. And,
Thank God you made it, girl.
I think that being a college student is a blessing. Like, not everyone has the opportunity to pursue an education. And I think that oftentimes when you get to college, you can be distracted easily, whether it be by your schoolwork, whether it be by your friends, and all the different opportunities that you have that perhaps you didn't have before. But I think it's important that even as college students, we still see that even though God has blessed us with this opportunity, that we still place a priority in developing our relationship with him. And I feel like the rich fool, he didn't see that God was the reason why he had all the blessings that he had, and as a result, obviously his life was taken. And I don't know if it's going to be that drastic, but I believe that whenever we place the priority on our relationship with God, that we'll see the benefits. And it makes me think of Daniel in the Bible, and I'm going to read Daniel 1:20, if that's okay.
Read it, Carl.
Let me pull it up real quick. My device is acting up. But basically it just says that Daniel was found 10 times better than the teachers and those around him that were supposed to be the experts on whatever subjects. And I believe that Daniel is a perfect example, because he too was trying to learn so that he could enter the king's personal service. And obviously, to be someone who's close to the king, you must be someone who's very intelligent, someone who's very well-rounded, who knows about a lot of things. And I believe that if Daniel was able to do that, but still see the importance of having a relationship with God, I believe that gives us an example for ourselves as college students, that even though I am trying to get this degree, that is not the utmost important thing, and that should not cause my relationship with God to be put on the back burner.
Yes, and I do believe what you're saying. What you're saying is very important, because the Bible tells us that remember thy Creator in the days of your youth. So only because you're a college student, or only because you're like in this phase of your life, does not mean that you should neglect God. And what you're saying is important, that it is a blessing, because not a lot of people get to go to college at all.
Yeah,
like, it's a huge blessing. So only because you've been given the opportunity does not mean that you should just put God to the side. Like right now, I'm not saying this to brag or anything, but by God's grace, I've been able to go to college, and I'm also doing the ministry on the side, and it is possible. And another thing that I've realized is that what you said from it, Marian, was that Daniel was found 10 times wiser. So you should understand that when you're doing the ministry for God and you're also studying, we're not saying just do the but also studying, there's a huge blessing that comes with it. You're much smarter, I do believe. You have more knowledge because you understand like what it takes to do both.
And even relating it, not necessarily college, but relating it to work. A lot of Christians, when we get promoted or we become blessed, we forget that it's God who gave us that blessing. A lot of us, even including myself, will spend time in our closet and we'll be like, God, this job, like, God, please open the door, open the windows of heaven.
Open the floodgates.
Open the floodgates. Pour out your blessing upon me. You'll be like, even when it's all night prayers, you'll go walking up and down. People are like, are you okay? Just because you want a job. And then when God finally gives you a job, it is so funny or interesting that's when people, they don't come to church on Sunday, they backslide, or they don't come on weekly
They make
service.
excuses.
They make excuses
Yes.
because you forget that it's God who has promoted you, it's God who put you into that position. So it's important that even when you get a job, you still serve God. It's important that you behave wisely with the blessing that you've been given. People should be able to look at you and say, wow, this person is a worker, but still serves the Lord.
Yes,
This person is a king, like Daniel. He had so many responsibilities, but he was still found praying unto God. And that's why I love Daniel so much. And does anybody have a personal example of possibly when they started working and then they misused the opportunity that were given?
Well, yeah, as I said before, I didn't really spend my money wisely, but what you've been saying reminds me of this song, and it's called Johnny. Yeah, were you thinking that too? And it basically it talks about this guy and how he was, before he was blessed, he was very close to God. Yeah, he was faithful, always the first person in church. He was like the usher, like organizing things. But then once God blessed him with what he was asking for, he found that he was slipping away, and like his priority was no longer in the Lord, and rather it was in other things.
Like the song literally says, like, God gave you a car, now where have you parked?
You guys should sing it.
Yeah,
for
you
us.
should
Yes, wow.
I mean, we can sing the chorus.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
Oh, Johnny,
Remember where you're coming from, and where your life could have been. God blessed you with a better life, and now you hardly find time for it. That's it.
Wow. That's the song.
And it's a blessing. And just to go with what they're saying, that when God blesses you, you shouldn't take it for granted. When God blesses you, you should be able to remember and walk in the things of God. When God blesses you, you should remember that you must still be found serving Him. And when God blesses you with riches or whatever it may be, you shouldn't just take it for granted, and you shouldn't waste the opportunities you have been given. And with that beautiful song, we're going to take a short break and come right back to continue this discussion.
Hi guys, my name is Francisca.
And welcome back to the First Level.
What up, y'all?
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the First Love TV show. We've been looking at the life of David, and we've been looking at how he became successful. And we said that he did not neglect God. We said that as he was lifted up, he always behaved wisely. And in this segment, we're going to look at other ways in which David became successful. And one such way I believe he became successful was the ability to adapt for progress. And when you even look in the Bible, you see David, he behaved like a madman. He behaved like a madman just in order to be promoted or to adapt or advance in life. And so as Christians, I believe it's some of the things that we must learn and also adapt.
We're not saying that like a mad person.
We're not saying we're not saying act like a madman, but we're saying that there's certain times in your life where you're going to have to adapt, you're going to have to adjust in order to succeed in life. And if you even take, for example, let's say working in your work life or your work career or your career, maybe you have, a desire to be a chief executive. But, being a chief executive doesn't come overnight.
Yes.
You have to start from somewhere. Maybe you have to start by being maybe an admin or being a manager and gradually working your way up. And sometimes we don't want to adapt or go into certain roles in order to be promoted. And so sometimes we miss out on our blessing because we are unable to adapt or we don't want to adapt. And I believe that is an example of how people do not progress in life because they don't want to adapt or change certain things in their lifestyle in order to move ahead.
Yeah, and another example that comes to mind is, like, personally for me, when I was going to college my freshman year, I had to adapt the way I learned because in high school, I didn't have to put in much effort, but I still saw the grades that I was wanting. So when I went into college, I know everybody was telling me, you can't do the same thing, but I was like, bruh, they don't know what they're talking about. They're not me, though. So when I tried it, it failed. So I realized that I had to adapt the way I learned if I wanted to see the grades that I was wanting. So I decided to start going to office hours, tutorials, like every extra thing. I used to not do those kinds of things. But then I realized that I needed to adapt, and as a result, I was seeing grades that were closer to what I wanted. Not always what I wanted, but closer.
And even when we were saying like going to office hours and stuff, some people they'll say that, oh, I'm shy, I don't really like talking to people. But you have to adapt if you want to succeed.
I'm one of those people. I had to adapt.
You have to adapt if you want to succeed in your school or in your education. You can't say that, oh, I'm afraid of the professor, so I won't go to after hours. But you see, you're getting C's and D's. God forbid it will not be anybody's portion. But you have to run quickly and go seek that advice. And like you were saying, maybe you're coming from a background where you're used to learning by yourself. Sometimes you don't even have to study as much. I remember when I was in high school, I was like, oh, I'm taking IB courses. There were courses.
Okay, Andrea. Wow.
IB courses are like college courses you take in high school. So I was taking those courses and I was like, well, college is gonna be a breeze. I can just do the same thing. I can, I don't have to spend so much time studying. First day of college, I was like, my goodness, like. I was like, Lord, I really need help here. And I remember I went to my professors, I went to my friends. I even tried to get a study group so that I can, work with others in order to study because I'd had to adapt in order to progress. And by the grace of God, I ended up getting like a 3.5 and other things like that.
Look at you.
Just because I adapted. So it's important that in life, you have to adapt in order to be able to progress or grow in your life.
I think since we're talking about college, mine was more like, I didn't really like staying up late. Like, I didn't see the point of staying up late to study and things like that. But when midterm time came, I was like, no, I have no choice. Like, there was so much material to cover, but I was just like, no, if I sleep now or if I stay, like, because I just really, the late going to 12-1, 2, I'm like, what is that, man? But I really had to learn that if I really want to pass my midterm, like, I have to, like, push myself to adapt to this new life. And I realized that in college, like, you can't make it if you're just sleeping early or if you're not doing the same, like, if you're not doing what you have to do. So it's important to understand that, like what we were saying about David, he was able to adapt in the situation he was in. So if you're in college right now, make sure you adapt to where you're at, the things that you need to do to be successful.
Yeah, and even outside of college, like even regarding like your Christian life and like even like your ministry, I believe like the Bible says, Paul said, I became all things to all men. And I feel like for me personally, I was like, oh, I'm a shy person. I don't like going up to people. But if you keep that mindset, like you won't progress in your ministry or your Christian life. Like you won't be able to evangelize to people or tell people about Christ if you just stay reserved to yourself. So like I had to like help coax myself to start saying hi to the people next to me, things like that.
Okay,
so that
Mary.
you can start conversation.
Round
So
of
that you can
applause.
like start a conversation and like eventually lead it into something else. But yeah, I had to, even like regarding your ministry, I think you have to push yourself. Like even if you have some sort of fellowship or something, change like the way your service is. If you see that it's not growing, maybe you can add something, make it more exciting, but just adapting and like changing things so that you can see progress being made in whatever it is that you're doing.
Something like that happened to me when I moved back from America back to England, and
UK.
I was like used to being in a church where I was known by everyone. Like everyone knew me, not because I'm special, but like I mean, I'm just like, oh,
You are
Chloe.
special. Everyone knows you.
But and so then I moved to England and I went to a new church where the people that were known and the people that were like had like a sort of family like vibe about them were the people that were working in the ministry, and I couldn't be a seat warmer and feel that same kind of love that I loved so much about church. And so for me, it became a rapid change of you need to start doing work in church. You need to join a prayer group. You need to try and be praise and worship. You need to be in the choir. So like, I think it's true about adapting, because if I didn't adapt in that church, I would have felt uncomfortable because I knew it was the church
Or you
for
could have
me.
easily left it.
Yeah,
Even though
I knew it was the church for me, but I also knew that what I was doing was not enough anymore, and that I had to do something further in order to be what is needed in that church. Like as Paul said, like be all things to all men. So in that church, they needed people that worked for the Lord all day, and I needed to be that person. So yeah.
And earlier, Francisco was talking about like how she has a fellowship and on campus. And I know many of us, all of our viewers who are watching, maybe God has called you to do different things. Maybe He's called you to maybe sing, to minister, whatever it may be. But I'm going to talk about the like ministering aspect. Maybe let's say you have a fellowship like Francisco or some of us on this, a fellowship where a group of people meet. Maybe you may need to adapt in the sense that maybe you don't like reading. Maybe you don't like listening to messages. Maybe you don't like,
Messy.
watching videos of other preachers and things like that. But, in order to progress in life, in order to be able to be a better person, in order to be able to even amount to anything in the ministry, it's important that you watch closely and you follow other people closely. It's like learning how to cook. You watch somebody do it, and then by watching them, you practice it, and then you actually do it, and then you become a great person. So you have to learn to adapt. Maybe you might say that, oh, when I listen to people preaching, I don't really like the sound, or when I watch preaching videos, it doesn't really move me. But you have to learn to adapt in order to be able to grow spiritually, and also in order to be able to lead people in life. So I think that's important.
And one thing I just realized is that you also have to be able to adapt into like being single, in like both sense, as in being single. Let's just say, for example, maybe you're in a relationship or you're used to being with someone, right? But then like maybe you guys break up or something like that. It's also an important thing for you to learn how to adapt to being by yourself, learning to be by yourself, like what you like, go back to like the basics. And one thing that I just realized is that whenever you're going to heaven, you're not going in a group, you're going by yourself. So you have to be able to, have to be able to adapt, to learn how to do things for yourself, as in your quiet time. Like we're talking about ministry, but also just in the sense of just learning how to be by yourself, learning what you like, learning what pleases God, not what pleases man. Because if you're following people, you're going to get to the point that you want to do what other people are doing, but you're adapting to please God, not others. So I also think it's important to learn how to be single, as in maybe with as in a bay factor, and also single as in pleasing God. So
Yeah, and I think it takes a certain humility sometimes to adapt. Like you said, David pretended to be a madman so that he could get out of the situation that he was in. I mean, he was a whole king acting like a madman, and I feel like sometimes
doesn't make sense.
sometimes like our pride could get in the way. Like you were saying, following other preachers, maybe someone does something better than you, for you to follow them and be like, oh, maybe I should do this a certain way or do this a certain way so that I can adapt and become a better person. Like maybe this person is less quarrelsome than me. Maybe I should learn from them. Or maybe this person is more efficient with the things that they do with their time and the way they organize. Like maybe I should adapt the way that I'm doing things so that I can progress and become a better person. So I think that's important, to be humble and to just see the things that you could improve on and then adapt accordingly.
And even to just touch back on Francisca's point when she was talking about the singlehood aspect, I think that it's important that, let's say maybe you do go through in a relationship and then it does end, that it's important that you learn to adapt in order to progress in life. A lot of times people go mad, or they even lose their mind, or they even become suicidal, or they become depressed because, you know, a relationship hasn't worked out, whether it's a relationship that is leading on to maybe marriage or even friendships. Sometimes those relationships don't work out, and you can go through a stage where you even become depressed or suicidal or all of those things, but you must learn to adapt, like how Francisca was saying, in being single and knowing that, and adapting and believing God that all things will ultimately work out for your good. If you just tuned into the First Love TV show, we've been talking about David, and we said that David behaved himself wisely when he was blessed. We also said that David learned to adapt in order to progress in life. We said that as Christians, whenever we're blessed with something, we must use it wisely. Whenever we're blessed with something, we must remember that it is God who gave it to us. We also said that in order to progress in this life, we must adapt, whether it's changing the way we study or whether we have to adapt to being single. All of these things are important. And these are things that David did in order to be successful. We're going to be back next week as we continue this great discussion. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody. Thank you for watching the First Love TV show. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back next week Wednesday at 7 p.m. CST. If you're a French speaker, we invite you to attend our first service, which begins at 9 a.m. Our second service starts promptly at 11 a.m., which is in English.
If we have found grace.
We are located at 7601 West Sam Houston Parkway South, Houston, Texas, 77036. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to receive alerts for our services and TV shows. Have a blessed and fruitful week.